I'm curious, for this new anime that they're supposedly doing, are they gonna get Camilla Luddington to come back and voice Lara Croft? I don't know. I sure hope they do. Rise of the Tomb Raider. So Rise of the Tomb Raider is the sequel to the 2013 Tomb Raider game. This one came out in 2015, and it's, the second game in this new Tomb Raider Survivor trilogy. And in Rise of the Tomb Raider, we are off to Siberia, because we're looking for the fabled lost city of Kitesh. This fabled lost city is said to be home of something called the Divine Source, an artifact that supposedly holds the key to immortality. Basic classic adventure stuff. And so, off we go on our new Tomb Raider adventure. And what can I say? This game does step it up from the previous one. The graphics are a lot better, it's more cinematic than the previous one. I didn't know how it could be, but it is. I mean, I've played this game a few times in the past few years. And yeah, I'll let you know, I didn't play this game or its sequel until after the Alicia Vikander movie came out. So that's my timeline. And this might sound bad, but it's really not. Of these 3 Tomb Raider Survivor games, this one is my least favorite. But of course, that's not saying I don't like the game. This game is awesome. I mean, it's fun, adventure Tomb Raider stuff. How is that not just the best thing ever? But in a list where you love everything, one of them just has to be your least favorite. In this case, it's this one. There are actually a couple of things that this game added to gameplay that I was not a huge fan of, I'll be honest. And whereas the first game, it introduced me anyway to the world of Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the fun gameplay, taking out bad guys, traversing a harsh environment, and the story was really good. You're stranded on an island and you run into this cult. That game blew my mind when I first played it. Here in Rise of the Tomb Raider, it's more or less your basic run-of-the-mill archaeological adventure stuff. You're looking for a fabled lost city because it has some fabled lost artifact which has some sort of supernatural power. You've seen that in things before. And of course, while we're in Siberia looking for this fabled lost city, there will be bad guys with guns who also want this lost artifact. And so in this game, we are actually finally introduced to Trinity. They were the bad guys in the 2018 movie, but it wasn't really until I played this game where I got to see what Trinity is all about. And they're your basic run-of-the-mill evil organization in an archaeological adventure like this. The main bad guy in this game, his name is Constantine. Of course, that's just a bad guy name. He's a pretty hardened dude. You don't want to mess with him. I mean, one of the first scenes you see him in, he's dealing with a few of his lackeys. They fail him. And so he gouges out one of his guy's eyeballs. You're like, ugh. That's brutal. The guy's just left squirming there on the ground like, oh, my eyes. So yeah, that lets you know Constantine is a pretty bad dude. But more interesting villain in this game is Anna. Because Anna actually has a history with Lara Croft's father, Richard Croft, who is touched on a lot more in this game than he was in the previous one. This game actually does give you a lot more backstory into Richard Croft, why Lara Croft is doing what she's doing. She's doing it to follow in her father's footsteps to make him proud. You find out that Richard Croft was also looking for this lost city of Kitesh. He was looking for the Divine Source for immortality. So here in this game, Lara Croft is finishing what her father started. There's a history there with Trinity and Anna and Constantine. It all ties together in a really interesting way, so I'll give the game that. However, the coolest characters in this game, in my opinion, are this group of native people called the Remnant. When you're on your quest in Siberia, you come across this civilization. They call themselves the Remnant, and they become your allies in this quest. It's really cool, actually. They're really cool characters. You have Sophia. She's your cool warrior archer chick. And then there's her father, Jacob. Most interesting character in the game, in my opinion. Other than Lara Croft, that is. Because he seems to know a lot about this fabled lost city. You grow to really care for him because he seems to have been through a lot in his day. He helps you take out Trinity in really cool ways. You just grow really attached to him. By the end of the game, you're like, yeah, this guy's awesome. Team Jacob all the way. You also have Jonah returning from the previous game, which is nice. It's nice to see a familiar face. Kind of. I mean, he looks completely different. But it is good to know that this game does not scrub off all the characters from the previous game. There is some familiarity in here. I mean, Sam isn't in this game, which is one of the things that bummed me out. Because the 2013 game made such a big deal out of Sam. She was such an important character in there. So the fact that she's not in this game at all, or the next one, it really left me scratching my head. There is actually a part of this lore that explains it. I don't remember if it's this game or like a comic somewhere. But it is mentioned that Lara and Sam had some kind of a falling out between the events of the previous game and this one. But I don't know. I wish that hadn't happened. Maybe the writers of this game were like, yeah, Sam doesn't really have a place in the story here, so we'll just write her out. I don't know, but it did bum me out. So as much as I've been saying that this game is your basic run-of-the-mill archaeological adventure, that doesn't mean this game is not still awesome and addicting and super fun to play. It's still super cinematic. I mean, you see these huge snowy landscapes. There's a lot of ice in this game. Those scraggly walls that you climbed in the previous one, in this game, they're mostly ice walls. And you have 2 pickaxes in this game instead of 1, so you're climbing this ice wall. It's still just as slow, but it looks better. And then, of course, there are those scenes where you're running from like a helicopter that's firing at you. You're going down these zip zip lines. It's super cool. You just want to be like, adventure! Seahawk, She-Ra. This is like the stuff that great epic adventures are made from, and it's just so awesome. Now, as for the gameplay, like I said, they added a lot of new elements, some of which I really liked and I took full advantage of. Others, though, I was like, I'm never gonna do that, and I just was not a huge fan of. You're still running around this harsh environment, taking out bad guys. You have the same weapons you did in the previous game, the bow and arrow, the rifle, the shotgun, and the pistol, and I still prefer the same ones, the bow and arrow and the rifle. Although using the fire arrows is not nearly as gratifying as it was in the previous one because the bad guys don't react the same way. You know, in the previous one, they were yelling in horror as they burn to death. In this one, they don't really do that. They just go like, and then they die. But this game adds poison arrows to the mix, and that's pretty cool, because now you fire them at bad guys and you get to see them choke to death, which is really funny, because you release it releases this gas cloud, and these guys are just like, you're just like, yep. Bye-bye. Dead people. You also have stealth kills, which you kind of had stealth kills in the previous game. But in this one, if you're on like a platform above the bad guy, you can straight up take your knife and just jump on them from above, stab them in the head. That's really cool. That's a stealth kill. That's awesome. You can also now throw projectiles. You can take like a bottle, make a Molotov cocktail, throw it at a group of bad guys, they just burn to death. I don't do that a whole lot because I'd rather just shoot them with the weapons I have, but it is useful sometimes. Like you can take an object, you don't have to make a weapon out of it. You can just take an object, throw it, it'll distract them. It'll get them off your ass for a minute, so that's useful. Also, a cool thing is that once you kill a bad guy, you can make a trap out of their corpse, which is really useful. If there's like a bad guy coming up who's like really armored with a shield or something, if there's a dead bad guy between you and him, you don't have to take out this big armored guy. You can just make a trap out of that corpse, so when this big armored bad guy walks towards you, the trap will just go off and kill him. That is super useful. It saves you ammo and you're less likely to die. I actually did that a lot during my most recent playthrough. But as for like basic gameplay elements, this game actually improved a lot from the previous one. You can now run, which gets you to places faster. I do that a lot. You can also slow down and walk. You know, you can control your speed, which you couldn't do in the 2013 game, at least not on a computer. This game also added a swimming element, and you can hold shift to swim faster. You can dive underwater, that helps you get through the story. Of course, Lara can't hold her breath forever, so you gotta find the surface soon, otherwise she'll drown and die. Until you get the rebreather later on in the game, which allows her to be underwater as long as you want to, which is pretty useful, yeah, because there are some extras and relics down there that you're gonna wanna find. Another thing that this game added is that you can pick from different outfits. Yeah, you can choose what Lara Croft is wearing. Me, I went with the blue Henley because it's the thinnest one, and Lara Croft is still hot as hell. What can I say? I'm a simple man. One addition that I actually was not a huge fan of, though, is the broadhead climbing arrows. There are these like wooden walls that you have to go across to get to the next point, and to get there, you have to like fire these arrows into the walls, and so you have to like climb to these arrows, jump from arrow to arrow. You would think, all right, that's a cool addition to the game, but I don't know, I don't really see the point of it. You could have just made those walls like ice walls or gravel walls or whatever. You could have just climbed them with your axes. Although actually, now that I think about it, jumping and climbing on those arrows is faster than just climbing with your pickaxe, which means you get up walls faster. Maybe that is another improvement. Maybe it's not such a bad part of the game. All right, props to the broadhead arrows. Totally flipped my mindset on that just now. There are also these side quests you can do during the story. You'll come across these guys and they'll be like, hey, I need you to do something for me. And if you do this thing, I'll give you something in return, like a reward. Like one of the first ones you come across in the game, you get a lockpick in return, which is really helpful actually. It helps you open stuff and get more rewards, more loot. I always do that side quest when I play this game because the lockpick is really useful. And there's also a money system. Yeah, I know, a lot of new things in this game. You find these gold coins like on the ground wherever during the course of the game, and there's a shack you run across at a point in the game where you can buy stuff, including the rope ascender is one of these items, so get that. It's a cool new addition to the game. I didn't mind it. And of course, this game brings back stuff from the first game, like the tomb puzzles. The tomb puzzles are actually beautiful in this one. Like that Byzantine ship that's frozen in ice, you look at that and you're like, wow, I gotta take a closer look at that. And so you're solving the puzzle, you feel like an archaeologist. It's great. This really cool ethereal music is playing in the background, so you're like, ooh, wow, this is like an ancient mystery. The music in this game was actually composed by a different composer from the first game, as will the next game's soundtrack be done by a different composer. But I do love the fact that they brought back Lara Croft's theme from the previous game. But also, Bobby Tahori actually gave the Remnant their own theme, which I didn't even realize until my most recent playthrough. I was like, yeah, that's a recurring theme. I hear it a lot throughout the game. It's the Remnant's theme. It's actually really cool. It's like ethereal sounding. It gives you the sense that this Remnant group has been around for hundreds of years. Yeah, you get that from the music. It's really cool. So in the end, Rise of the Tomb Raider is a bigger game than the 2013 Tomb Raider. The graphics are a lot better, it's more cinematic, it adds a lot more gameplay elements so it feels more involved. But for me personally, the story just is not as memorable because the villains are pretty basic and it's just, you know, you're looking for a fabled lost city with a fabled lost artifact. You've seen that before, you know? But it's still that same great gameplay you love from Tomb Raider. You still love taking out bad guys. You still love Lara Croft. She's an awesome character. Camilla Luddington does a fantastic job as always. I love the Remnant characters. They're super interesting. But really of the 3 games in this Tomb Raider Survivor trilogy, I've probably played this one the least. Again, gotta have a least favorite, even though this game's still really cool. So, Rise of the Tomb Raider, have you played it? What do you think about it? And if you have played these games, what is your preferred weapon of choice? I'm curious. Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.